Welcome to another episode of Off Script with Rip. I'm your host, Ryan Ripken, and this is a podcast where I bring on guests from a variety of different industries to talk about their story. And regardless of what journey they have taken, I promise if you listen to the words, there are many things that you can resonate or find relatable. And I'm switching it up a little bit today because I'm bringing on a guest who's my former teammate from the minor leagues, Steve Klimek. Now, Steve has pitched with the Minnesota Twins and the Baltimore Orioles organization. And the reason why there's a twist on this is that Steve is going to talk about his experiences, but he also has worked for the Major League Baseball Players Association. And recently in the news, Major League Baseball and Major League Baseball Players Association just came to a deal that would help out minor league players to unionize minor league baseball players. And Steve has a lot of knowledge on this subject. Plus, we talk about our own experiences through the minor leagues and what things mean moving forward. And also, we talk about some other good stuff too. So enjoy the interview with Steve Klimek. It really is a fun interview and a very insightful for those who love baseball. So without further ado, here is Steve Klimek. Welcome to another episode of Off Script with Rip. I'm your host, Ryan Ripken, and I'm here with my friend, Steve Klimek. Steve, what is going on?
How are you, Ryan? I'm so excited to be on the pod. Didn't think I would have a place here on the pod, to be honest. You got some guys with a little more resume than I do, but I'm happy to be here and happy I could find a place in the pod with Off Script with Rip.
I appreciate that. You know, honestly, you almost didn't have a place because we just couldn't get this production going. And I know it's not in the budget to fly you up yet, so I apologize. But for those that are wondering, this is maybe take 3, 4?
This is take 4. This would have been better in person. Once you get that big sponsorship, maybe it's in the expense budget to fly me up. But any potential sponsors out there, you know, Off Script with Rip taking off.
Investors, possibly you. Yeah, so that's honestly, I would love that. That's where we hope to be going down the road. But Steve, glad you can come on. And as the introduction had for the beginning of the episode, you know, Steve and I played together, and I'll let you tell your story, Steve, but Steve has had his own professional career. So Steve, just give a little background to everyone about who you are and your kind of journey through professional baseball.
Yep. So I'm a right-handed pitcher. I was drafted out of St. Bonaventure University in the 33rd round in 2015. I spent 7 years with the Baltimore Orioles. I played with you in 2018 and again in 2019. And that's really where we became pretty good friends and where our relationship took off. And after my contract had expired with Baltimore, I signed a minor league deal with the Minnesota Twins in 2022. And at this time, I'm a minor league free agent / wannabe Hollywood actor, and just pursuing some business things as well. I have a passion for sports business and entertaining some ideas there as well. So a little bit of everything going on in my life right now.
A little bit of everything. Hey, minor league free agent, been there before. It's that could be a whole thing we can get into as we get going. But the Hollywood acting part is actually where you talked about this off air. What are we cooking up here? Are you the talent? You the extras actor?
You know,
walk me through.
I'm an extras for now. Will I probably move to Hollywood? Yeah. And by that, I mean no, but most likely. Do I have an agent? Yes. Do I have a baseball agent? Yes.
Yes.
How many? Do you have 2 agents, Ryan? Actually, you may have 2 agents. I may have said that to the wrong guy.
No, you know, hey, I don't play baseball anymore. You know, I'm retired. You know, so it's whole different ball game now. But I'm jealous because, you know, that I think I've told this people for a while. You know, I've had I would love to be an extras actor. I mean, I don't know if I can be the main guy, but extras actor, the 1-liners, 2-liners, right in my wheelhouse.
Right up your alley.
Yeah. So where can we find you on the big screen?
Well, it won't be out for another month or 2. It is a summertime commercial. It will feature a Major League Baseball pitcher, maybe rhymes with the first part of his name is Nasty, of his nickname. I'll let you put the rest together. I don't know how much I can and can't say, quite honestly.
So you signed a disclosure,
something of that sort. Yeah. To be honest, I was new to the whole thing. a friend of a friend of my wife's sent me this post and was like, "Hey, they need an extra in this commercial. Your husband plays baseball. Is he interested?" I was applying to be the catcher, in which I had one line, and it was fairly corny. I ended up not getting the role, but they wanted me to be an extra, and my role as an extra. I am a teammate of this player. You don't see a whole lot of me except for my arms raising in triumph after a big W. You'll see me playing catch in the background of the video, and you'll also see me sitting with a donut box on my lap. Outside of those very quick glimpses, you're not seeing a whole lot of me.
What I'm hearing is you're a team player and you're versatile.
I took a background role in my very first Hollywood setting.
Well, hey, you got to start somewhere, right? It's one job leads to another and another. I told you before, I'm the big one-liner. It's someone falls down, you go up to help. Hey, are you okay? Or medic, like someone help this. Like that's me.
Well, you do have some history in commercials. Can you?
Oh, yes,
I want to dive into what you did in your childhood days.
Yeah, if you guys are looking for, I was kind of a big deal with with Quaker State. I raced against my dad in a video game promoting Quaker State oil, because why wouldn't we promote Quaker State oil?
Shout out Quaker, you could be a sponsor.
It could be. You remember the good times we had, but the thing that I had a problem, they claimed that my dad won in a video game. That didn't happen.
Can I still find that video?
Oh, it's out there. It's out there. We'll pull this up for everyone to see. God, we could get going on the acting careers forever. And honestly, maybe that's where it's taking, media. I don't know where this is going to go, but the lead into, if you're not going to be an actor and your baseball career, trying to figure out if you want to do independent baseball or not, that's the next step. So for people to understand, baseball, if you're not in affiliated baseball, which means you're with one of the minor league teams of the Major League Baseball organizations, you have to go outside of it to keep your career going. And that's leagues like the independent league in the US. There's, overseas or in different countries. You can play in Mexico. Some players go to Japan, South Korea. But we're just talking about, you're kind of exploring the options, because it's hard to leave professional affiliated baseball is what it's called and come back.
Absolutely. And, after the 2021 season is really where I started to think, I was getting up there in age. I was entering free agency. I thought teams would offer me a deal, but you never know. Jobs are getting cut left and right, and you never know until that piece of paper is in front of you. So I started to entertain some ideas of, what do I want to do after baseball? At this point in time, I had applied for a position with the MLBPA and had some conversations with some of their staffers, and they found a place for me in their nonprofit called the Players Trust. I did partnerships and some business development over there, and that kind of gave me a lead into business and what my life might look after my baseball days are done.
Yeah. So right now you're at the crossroads. So hopefully, whichever way you decide with your playing career or not, this is the reality that everyone has. Something that I dealt with last year. Same thing of, if I wasn't going to get an opportunity with affiliated baseball, what would be my next step? And for me, it was moving on from baseball, giving this whole media thing a crack and to see what would happen. But talk to me a little bit more about the MLBPA, because a big topic we're going to have today is everything, because we're on the podcast here. We want to be relevant and we want to talk about things that are happening right now. And a big story was minor league baseball players, having this new agreement or being protected in a union. But before we dive into that, can you just explain a little bit about what the MLBPA, that's the Major League Baseball Players Association, what they do and what their goal is, and their role in Major League Baseball?
Absolutely. And it's important to know that the MLBPA, this is a monumental achievement for the MLBPA and for minor leaguers as well. What I think is important to know about the MLBPA is, first of all, the landscape and the structure of the union. So it is separated into three arms. You have the MLBPA, which is the labor union, representing players and everything on field, off field, the entirety of the labor force of Major League Baseball players. Now, that was limited up until they brought in minor leaguers to just the 40-man roster players. They only represented players on the 40-man roster. So they represent the labor side. Then you have the merchandising side, which is called Players Inc. They handle everything business related, licensing, merchandising, and they represent players from a business standpoint. With Players Inc., it's important to know that they represent the back of the jersey, meaning players' last names, their face, their NIL. MLB owns the front of the jersey, meaning they're the team and everything on field from logos and stuff like that with players. So the MLBPA represents players in themselves, not the teams. Then you have the third arm where I was, which is the Players Trust. Shout out you Players Trust, doing a lot of great things, aiding and amplifying players in their philanthropic efforts. Really doing a lot of great things over there. They really are. Proud of everything they've accomplished, and I think soon they'll be at the forefront of philanthropy and in everyone's brains and in their minds. So
that was the detailed description I was looking for, because I think when you're from the outside, even being involved in baseball myself, you still don't fully understand what each role is. And as you're hearing, it's there's a lot of intricacies that go into the union. And also it sounds like maybe you're pushing for a sponsorship, maybe for the pod as well, but which I appreciate. But so you talked a little bit, you gave the background of what they're doing, and this has been a struggle. We just saw the CBA with Major League Baseball get renegotiated last year. And one thing though, and that's something that, correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, is it's whatever the contract length is, if it's 5 years, 6 years, whatever it's going to be, then constantly that's been renegotiated for decades, correct?
Correct. And it's typically every 4 years the CBA is renegotiated. And the collective bargaining agreement, the CBA, it covers everything from on-field play to the types of hotels you're staying in, the quality of food that you need, insurance. It encompasses everything around baseball and the labor union. So there's a lot that goes into it, and they are extensive. And it takes a lot to complete one. It takes a lot of effort and a lot of detail to have the CBA come to fruition and be closed.
Right. So, and again, that's, if you're hearing this and it just happened last year, and you can see that there was so much disconnect. There was a lockout, right? Is because this is a constant fight between, it's essentially, you have the business of the MLB that wants things a certain way or has an expectation. And then you have the players and the players union, then that's the representation, is trying to fight for a little bit more rights and more opportunities. Am I saying that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And just provide a baseline of rules and standardized expectations for players. There's a lot of money in the business of baseball, and making sure everyone is profiting respectfully and in the correct way, so no one's getting the short end of the stick, we'll say.
Yeah. And it's good to know, because, and also for people, if you look around in professional sports in the US, for all the other leagues, the MLBPA has been one of the strongest unions, and especially a big one that they have is the guaranteed contract situation. That was a big thing. And people, you're seeing that a lot in the NFL. That is a hot topic consistently. I know it's a variation of the sports, but the reason, Steve, why this is just fascinating. We went through the grinds of the minor leagues, and through our time, through all the times before ours, players were not protected. And these are the future, the future stars of Major League Baseball all have to go through the minor leagues. So how big of a deal that this is actually happening, in your eyes?
Again, it's monumental, and for a couple different reasons. One, the MLBPA is not all that large in how many employees they actually have. Granted that given that their clientele, MLB players, there's 1,200 MLB players. So you have a full organization that represents 1,200, and now you've brought on 5,400 minor league players, and you've got to staff that's what, over 4 times the size of who you currently represent. This is a massive reach for MLBPA to bring on all of these players, and it's an overhaul to where you've got to really amplify and expand your organization. But I also think it was paramount. It speaks to the volumes of Tony Clark and the staff at MLBPA to, one, get this deal done, but also, more importantly, have the wherewithal to actually bring on minor league players, because this is a huge and daunting task that requires countless hours of work that didn't necessarily have to be done, but it speaks volumes to the people that work at MLBPA to want to take on this work and take on this daunting task.
And it was, and for those of why we want to talk about this is because this has been an issue for a very long time, and we can speak, and this is why you're the perfect guy for this, Steve. Right now, we can talk about our own experiences, and you've been able to see both sides. We saw with a lot of players, every year when guys are drafted, the reality of what professional baseball is not what everyone, the perception to the rest of the country or the world is not actually what's happening behind the scenes. And a lot of guys, the average salary before was anywhere between like 5 to 17,000 for the year for guys. And you can't live off of that. And we've had stories. I know we'll dive more into that. But just so I'm not missing anything here, Steve. So the deal right now of what we're seeing is the essential increase in pay. Do you have a little bit more insight on the payment?
Yeah. So the main goal and unionizing players was to bring more standards to minor league baseball. You see it, and guys go from organization to organization, and there's no standards. It's basically whatever that team wants to do is what they can do, because there's no rules, responsibility to your players. There's no union to represent you. And so what the union does is give players a voice. Prior to, you could complain, but a team could release you if you complain, or you just didn't have any room for leverage, or really leverage at all, as a minor league player before last week when that CBA was signed. And there was a few topics of conversation that wanted to be changed. One, it was making more standards. So league wide, teams now have a baseline of things they have to provide, whether it be housing, whether it be a quality of food, transportation to the field, a minimum salary that is significantly more than it was prior. There's so many things that go into it, but the main keys and the main takeaways were raising the minimum salary, again, providing minimum standards. Contract length was another one. Contracts, when you were signed, they're 7 years. Players wanted to shorten that. If you're a college guy and at 21 you're signing a 7-year deal, you're locked into that until you're almost 28 years old, and you're not reaching free agency until 28. So that already sets you back quite a bit from making some money. And for those that don't know, free agency is where you can begin to make actual wages that are livable. But until you make it to free agency, the salaries were poor, to say the least. But once you make it to free agency, that's where you see deals that you can live a year on. They're actual livable salaries for a 1-year contract.
Right. And even to piggyback with that, and this is where this is debunking the whole situation with guys getting drafted. And before, I know the draft rounds have changed, but when we were being drafted, it was 40 rounds. And of that, you think, well, players get signing bonuses or they get bigger bonuses, and that's great. The reality, though, Steve, I mean, what you'd say, 10 to 15 guys got a legit, solid, maybe signing bonus?
Yeah. There was less than 20, I would say less than 20 players out of 40 picks actually had 6-figure signing bonuses. Now, that is sort of just speculation, in my opinion. I might be speculating that, but it's fairly insignificant for those who are actually obtaining six-figure signing bonuses.
Oh, but that's where the numbers get caught up. And if you're a first round pick, that slot value, and if you go there, even if they signed you under slot, and to explain to people, each round, specifically, it was in the top 10 rounds, you are slotted an amount of money for that round. You are selected, that pick you are selected. And the higher you are, so if you're the number one overall pick, there's a certain slot for that, all the way as you keep going down to later in the 10th round. But the other part, and you talked about leverages for college players are being stuck. If you are a college senior and you're drafted, you really don't have a lot of leverage. And I know guys that were taken in a slotted round where they were supposed to make or get a signing bonus of $250,000. They had no leverage and they signed for $5,000 to $10,000 total before taxes. And I know you might think like that's a lot of money when you say those numbers out loud, but you tax that, you send that back to your family, and then the league or your salary that you're making then for the season is going to lie somewhere between $1,200 to $2,000 until you get to AAA.
So when I was drafted, I was a 33rd round pick. Signing bonus, very insignificant. Don't come from money, didn't have much to begin with. I am living paycheck to paycheck, and we have to pay for our hotel, $300 a month. So I'm clearing $230 a month, if that. I'm sorry. Probably about that. At one point, I was so broke, I went to Dunkin' Donuts. I tried to get a donut and a coffee. $2, and I think it was like $3 or $4. My card got denied. I couldn't afford it. I had to I couldn't go out until my next paycheck came in. So I had $250 some in my account to then live off of. But I couldn't afford a donut and coffee.
The simple joy. What donut were you getting, by the way?
I think it was a chocolate glazed.
Oh.
I do like, nowadays I'm more of an apple fritter guy, but a nice chocolate glaze, I do appreciate that.
I'm going to be honest. I don't think I've ever had an apple fritter.
Stop it.
No.
An apple fritter? Never?
I don't think so. No, I've definitely been the guy. I like the chocolate glaze, the regular, the sprinkles on top of the chocolate glaze. Yeah, no, apple fritter, it just never went hand in hand.
That's shocking. See, that's shocking. That's a pretty commonplace donut, in my opinion.
Really?
I think so.
Apple fritters is a commonplace donut?
I think so, yeah. I don't think I'm outlandish in that and saying that. I think I'm outlandish in saying this. My grandmother used to get peanut donuts. I don't even know what the kind of donut. It's like a cake donut, and then it's glazed, and while it's still hot, they cover it in chopped peanuts. And let me tell you, next level. Grandma.
I mean, I'm in on that. That is in. Do they sell those nearby?
They should. Any like old school style bakery should have them.
I am
definitely a thing of the past, but man, let me tell you.
I'm in on that. I'm not in on the apple fritters yet, and maybe that will be my homework assignment. I can video this, post it about I was either right on my assessment or I was dead wrong.
Would love to see this. Would love to see this.
It's all about the content game, right? That's what we need to do. We got to work on the content. But back to it, like that's an example right there of that you're not the only one in minor league baseball that had to deal with certain things like that. And I mean, I remember guys when I was starting off my career, when you were at the field or facility, some of these guys tried to take everything that they possibly could so they did not have to go spend a single dime outside the field. And I'm talking about one of my favorite, since it's story time. I remember when I was at the Nationals, there was guys where they you can fill up your water bottles and everything at the field, right? Common concept. All right, you got the water, you got a big jug, you fill it up. The problem became that players, instead of filling up their water bottles, just took the giant water jug, put it over their shoulder or carried it, back to the hotel.
Talking about the giant igloo coolers, right? The giant 5-gallon igloo cooler.
5-gallon igloo cooler. Pick it up, put it on your shoulder or whatever, and then they would bring it to, and then we had to have a discussion of, hey guys, you cannot take the 5-gallon jug. Please fill up your water bottles, maybe bring another one, but you can't do that. But that's like a small sample size, right? Of guys were trying to do everything that they could to get by. And for some of these guys, like the other reality too, Steve, is, you know, how many families do we see of players that are coming in and with the salary, most of this money that they have, they're sending home, and they're now having nothing for themselves on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely. And it happens all the time. But I think what gets passed over is you see these massive signing bonuses, or you just see signing bonuses. You say, oh, you get a signing bonus. Well, great. Like you do, but you're kind of expected to save that and almost use that as your salary, because everyone knows that the salary you get throughout the year is sort of a joke. And you're expected to just use your signing bonus to get you through the minor leagues. And if someone goes 7 years, that signing bonus is long gone.
Yeah, well, that's the example back to the contract. So if you sign, you're 21 years old, you're coming out of college, and say you got let's say you got a mid-signing bonus. Let's just not even say it's over six figures. Let's just say it's somewhere between, you know, $25,000 to $100,000. And again, like no one's complaining about the actual getting a signing bonus. That's great. But over a 7-year period where your constant level of income is going to be anywhere between $5,000 to $15,000 roughly before taxes. And if you don't get a job in the off season, that money evaporates, and you're not able then to make more until that 7 years are up, because the team owns your rights. So you either have to make it to the major leagues, where that solves your problems, right? Obviously, you make it to the majors, your payment changes. But for a lot of guys that are grinding to make a living, and there are a lot of great players, it's a harsh reality. I mean, we just talked about this too. What was your off-season job, Steve? I actually know the answer. I just want you to say it.
I had a few, actually. When I was first drafted, I was living back in upstate New York. I substitute taught for about 2 or 3 off seasons, I believe it was. At that point, I had met my now wife, and I was living down in Tampa, and she worked as a nanny. Well, she was getting old, and she was ready to move on, start a real career, or a different career, I should say, not real. But she had outgrown her position as a nanny. Well, I'd gotten to be family friends with this family. And they said, hey, Steve, in your off season, would you be willing to work as a nanny? And I said, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Sure. I mean, I needed income. So I actually worked as a nanny for another 3 off seasons.
A manny,
actually. A manny, yes. And I've got a good story about this. So I take the kids to tennis. Now, I started with these kids when they are 3 and 5 years old. So I watch the kids, and I pick them up from school. I take them to their activity, so on and so forth. And then I bring them home. We do homework, long division, harder than you think. There's some complications. I challenge you, Ryan. You go back and do some long division. Bet you can't. Are you smarter than a 5th grader? Take 2.
You know what? I'm babbling right now because I don't know what to say. It wouldn't go well for me, Cotton. So continue with the story.
So I take the kids to tennis, and I'm sitting there with another mom that we're family friends with. So I'm sitting with this mom as the kids are playing tennis. There's another group of moms behind me, and I'm the only male. I'm in my mid-20s at this point. And the mom says, hey, I heard about this crazy thing. There's actually a guy around here that watches kids. Apparently he's a baseball player, and they call him like a manny. It sounds crazy. And this woman that I'm with, this friend, says, where did you hear this? And the woman says, oh, this local gym nearby, which the mom that I nanny for worked out at. She goes, stop it. This is him. This is Steve. Steve is the manny. So apparently I had quite the reputation around Tampa as a manny.
So you were the talk of the town.
One might say.
I mean, it's still are if depending on who you talk to. But like, first, I mean, but were you making more money doing that than when you
I
played or
actually
close
made
to
I
it?
actually made more money as a manny than I did playing baseball.
Doesn't that make you feel good? I mean, you were definitely top of the top. You were the talk of the town. You were the guy. You were the
I
Manny.
wouldn't say that, but unfortunately for players, like financially, they can't always just linger. It eventually takes a toll on you to where you are stressing about your lack of income as we get into the mid 20s and you start to, get married. Some players have kids. There's a lot of expense there that if you are making, I mean, couple $1,000 a month, it's very unsustainable. And some people just can't hang on any longer to where they're forced out of the game, not because they wanted to, but because they couldn't afford to keep doing it.
Yeah, you couldn't keep trying to chase the dream. And we've seen though, and even if you look around the MLB to start this season, there are players that have grinded through and made it through this part where they finally were able to debut. And they weren't in their early 20s, mid 20s. They were even approaching 30s or even over 30 where they're finally getting their chance. And if you go back to the backstory of it, and I think that's why, Steve, when people look at people making it to the major leagues for this grind of it, it's because of these reasons, right? Like the emotion of how much sacrifice you've made, because just like with everything, nothing's guaranteed. And some cases for these guys, and I think everyone can relate when you're chasing a dream for so long and you feel like it's not going to happen and it happens, it's beyond rewarding. I think
Absolutely.
that's why the emotional part comes in so much.
Absolutely. And you see these guys that are 28 to 30, whatever, older guys debuting, and it just means so much more. It means so much more, not only to them, but the people that are around them, that watch them grind when no one else saw them, and go through the minor leagues and go through some of these painstaking experiences. But to finally climb that mountain is got to be an unbelievable feeling based on what people have told me, and so on and so forth. But that you think makes it worth it. That's up to them to decide.
Oh, for sure, and it's a business decision. But again, going back to the overall conversation of this, so the bigger news is we're talking about where players are having trouble because of it was a part-time job being a professional baseball player in the minor leagues or even in the majors. It's still a part-time job in the major leagues, but when the money and the income is highly different than when you're in the minors, you can afford a little bit more leeway for guys. But for anything, being a baseball player is a part-time player.
I'm going to correct you. It's
Yeah,
not part time. It's seasonal. In that
seasonal.
it's seasonal in that your actual work is February until late September or early October. But then you also, when you're in the minor leagues, there's instructional league. That takes place in the fall. There's an early camp or a depth camp that begins in January, February. I mean, there's nowadays, Ryan, things have changed so much. When I drive by the Yankees complex in early January, they've got 50 plus guys there working out. When I was with Minnesota, I showed up February 10th. There were 70 guys there on February 10th. So they were just finishing up a velo camp, a command camp, a hitting camp. 70 players on that had finished up February 10th. So
And just so to correct me if I'm wrong with this though, and this how I remember it as well, I wasn't paid a salary for instructional league. I wasn't paid. It was a per diem.
correct.
Is that still the case?
No, not anymore. Now that the CBA has been signed. So
Okay, so since the CBA, that's what's changed.
correct. And so
But
what you're going to see from a salary aspect, and excuse me for cutting you up, you're going to
no,
see
get in there.
players have a salary for the season, but also get paid on a year round basis. Minus, I believe it's a 4-week dead period between Thanksgiving and Christmas. But outside of that, players will have a seasonal salary that is about double what they were making prior to. And then you'll also see them getting paid a much smaller, but at least they are still getting paid an amount throughout the offseason minus this dead period.
which again, that's a huge step up. But because of all this, and players are going to be having, a little bit larger salary. So the bump will be from, like we talked about, for low A, 11 to 26,000 for the year, or 27,000 in high A. Double A from 13,000 to 30,000. Triple A 17,000 to 35,000. Again, that's for the full year, right?
No,
Besides
no.
that
So
dead period.
that's just going to be for the season. That's their seasonal salary, and then they have a smaller amount that is paid out throughout the off season. And if you do attend an instructional league, an early camp, some teams have strength camps. You are getting paid for that as well, which is significant. Significantly different, and it's good to see players actually get rewarded for their work. Now, where I also think you're going to see a lot of gain is in NIL. So when a player initially signs his contract when they're drafted, their NIL is given up. They give it to MLB, and MLB is free to do what they want with it. Now, that's NIL, name, image, likeness. Anything with their name on it, they don't get paid for prior to now. So when Sony makes a MLB The Show game and you see a minor leaguer on it, they were not compensated, where 40-man roster players are compensated. And this takes us back to the Players Inc. portion of the MLBPA branch, where they handle all of the merchandising and licensing. Now that NIL has been granted back to players, they're going to actually have a say. They're going to be monetized in a way that they'll see some compensation for as well.
And that's different, obviously, because certain players before, you could still have sponsors and get endorsements. People had deals for clothing apparel if it was Nike, Under Armour. But this case, it's because of things that you don't think about that players did not have a say in. I just wanted to clarify.
So excuse me for not maybe vocalizing it properly. This is with group licensing. So group licensing is a collective where more than 3 players are being used in an advertisement, in a game, in a marketing campaign. So all of the minor leaguers, or at least a large portion of them, were in MLB The Show. Those players weren't compensated. Now they will be compensated. And this doesn't mean that, minor league baseball can go sell, minor league baseball could, but the Players Association can't go sell ads on jerseys. That's up to MLB to do. But anything that involves their name, image, or likeness, players can now monetize in a group licensing setting and actually see money in their pockets.
And that's great to hear. And again, this is why this is your perfect guy to have on, because some of this stuff's over my head. I mean, even trying to figure out the full salary that players are getting on a year-to-year basis. But this is big. But because of all the positives that we're hearing right now, there has to be a little bit of a backtrack here, right? Or an opposite. Can you talk about what that means now that there's more money going to players, what that landscape's going to look like for the minor league setup?
Yeah, absolutely. And, with more money in players' pockets, and with a lot of what MLB began in 2020 during COVID, when they cut 40 minor league affiliates, they had a goal and a vision to continue to cut down on minor league affiliates, and then in turn players and jobs. So in 2020, when they had cut down 40 minor league affiliates, it's over 1,000 jobs that were lost. Now that MLBPA has unionized minor leaguers, they've actually put a halt to that. There will be no more minor league contractions for the remainder of this CBA, which lasts until 2027. At that point, things might change, but in turn, there will be 180 players per organization this year, and we'll only see that drop down to 165 by the end of this CBA. So you are going to be losing some jobs, which is detrimental to even guys like myself who don't have jobs. And you'll see a lot of players that you may think deserve jobs and probably would have had jobs in the past. But in this day and age, they want to cut. And so that is, MLBPA did a great job by, limiting the amount of damage that is done, because I think it would have only been worse had MLBPA not stepped in.
Yeah, and And I think that's an interesting point. And again, it's not, this isn't trying to villainize anybody or make anything. It's just, I think what's great about this conversation is understanding the business and the optics from both sides. And for MLB, it was no secret that they were trying to change things, trying to cut down for obvious reasons. But for the player standpoint, even though you want everything to be working out in unison and in full agreement, that's not always, I don't know if the right word is intention.
It's a negotiation. So there's give and take. MLB sees it one way where they see it as a business, and they see minor leaguers as a loss, in my opinion. You often see minor league players not make it to the big leagues, which is just an expense for owners.
But every player, oh, I shouldn't say every player because it's not exactly, but high 90s of percentages of players, almost everyone that's drafted in the Major League Baseball draft has to go through the minor leagues. There's only probably been a few rare cases throughout the history of time. Like the majority of players, Steve, are going through the minor leagues. I mean, obviously Ohtani's not, but Ohtani still played professionally over in Japan. He was signed and came to America. So do you think that type of thought process, I don't want to say it's fair, but it's a crapshoot. You don't know who's going to turn out for you or what's going to be the right answer.
Yeah, I think you're right. It is. But in MLB's eyes, I think that they probably saw this as an expense to where most of these guys aren't going to make it. We have a pretty good idea of who we think will make it. So let's just, for lack of a better term, trim the fat, or lack of a better term, let's cut down on the number of players. Do I agree with it? Right. No, but
but again, like that's the business side of it, and this is trying to have people understand that even though it's sports are businesses. They are looking at it. The people, the owners, organizations are looking at it from a business standpoint and not necessarily from what is going. And we're the employees, and it's not that they're not trying to take care of us, but you're trying to maximize your product. And how's the best way to maximize your product? Just like any job you're going to have out there, if your performance isn't up to par, they're going to find a replacement. And if it gets to a point where they think there's too much spending, they want to find a way, in your case, to trim that.
Absolutely.
And so I guess in that case, and we look around, and even going into now with the rule changes that they're trying to make a better product, they're trying to make, is this kind of this all feels like everything's tied in right now. I feel like baseball's been more at a crossroads than it has been in the last 20 years. Would you think that that's kind of where it is, like where all this is coming together? Do you think that this is going to lead to better outcomes for both the players and the business, or do you think there's going to be a little bit more of turmoil and tension as these rule changes and players trying to find their own in this new kind of day and age of baseball?
I think that baseball is trending in the right direction. I think that this is a content age where people look at their phones and TikTok and very short attention spans. And baseball has historically been slow. And so although I think you're not going to see as short of game times as you have in spring training, I think they'll be somewhere in that 2:45 range to 3 hours. It is trending towards what people want because, again, like you said, this is a business. And how do we entertain to the people who are watching this? How do we provide a product that young people are going to watch with short attention spans?
But it's true. Like we are so reliant on our phones, like constantly. Even now in our generation, I feel myself glued. I used to feel comfortable having my phone down, not knowing where it was for hours. And now I go into full panic mode when I don't know where it is for 2 minutes.
We're absolutely addicted. I'm addicted. We're all addicted.
Yeah. So with you playing the minors, what rule changes were being implemented that you went through specifically?
And that's actually a great question because it leads me to something that I dealt with last year personally that other players, hopefully now that MILB has been unionized, may not have to. We were test dummies, right? We were test
That's
dummies.
exactly where I wanted to go with this.
They're experimenting with rule changes. They're experimenting with new baseballs, and we don't have a say. They're treating us like test dummies. Meanwhile, this is my career. This is my livelihood. And I don't have a say in what type of ball we're using. They were doing a trial last year where I was in AA. And they had a 6-week program with one MLB trial baseball. Then they did another 6-week trial with a different baseball. And then they had a final trial with a regular Major League Baseball. And each ball had a different composition and a different tackiness to it. The goal was to provide a different baseball with more stick without actually impacting the integrity of the game. So I'm throwing a chalky MLB baseball, which I've never thrown before, and expected to go perform at the same level or better than I had prior with a ball that I've never used before in my life. But my whole game is to, spin the ball. It's to manipulate the ball. And for me, breaking balls have always been my specialty and my knack, my niche.
And your bread and
butter. It's bread and butter. And so now I've got to spin an entirely different baseball that feels so different than anything I'd ever thrown. And also, after this trial, you're going to go try and change it and throw a different ball.
And that's the crazy thing, because that talking point right there was, and on a smaller scale, then was when baseball was cutting down on the tackiness, right? In Major League Baseball, and you were seeing some of the top pitchers in the world really struggling to adjust, and that it was evident, right? Like there was control, the ability. Overall, it was a little bit more problematic, right? But at the higher level, you're still there and you've already kind of proven yourself. And people can probably argue to this point, well, if you're good enough, you're going to make it, right? If you're good enough and it's meant to be, you're going to find a way. But to your point, if things are being changed and you're one of the guys that are on the cusp of either trying to make a name for yourself or your career is over, every little thing matters.
Right? Yeah, and I think when you're at that elite of a level, and you are so good and you've used something one way, or you've used a product and that's a certain product, and now all of a sudden they're going to go and change the product that you're using, it's going to make a difference, I think, to everybody, regardless of whether you're good enough on the cusp, whether you're an all-star or not. You saw injuries happen because of it, but at least you had someone fighting for you to make sure that your voice was heard and you weren't just pummeled over and deal with it. You had a voice.
You're right. Yeah. And everything, all the rule changes that are happening or that are being implemented right now in Major League Baseball, and fans are feeling or questioning whether they like some or not. Every rule change that happens has gone through the minor leagues. Everything that's happened that it has been tested in the minor leagues at different levels. And then they'll look at it and go, oh, we like this or we don't like it. And whether the players like it or not, the feedback there is just to say, well, maybe there's something to work with, but no one's looking at it at projecting to kind of what that would do to players' performances and how much that is an adjustable aspect of the game that players are not ready to, or I shouldn't say ready to, they're not prepared because they haven't experienced that.
To no fault of their own. They just haven't. The game has been one way, and now all of a sudden you're going to change it, and no player has a chance to voice their opinion or even have like a practice with it. I had one live BP with a different baseball, and that was it. I threw about 20 pitches with a different baseball, and they're like, okay, well, yep, now's the new baseball. Go get them.
How'd that go?
I did not enjoy it. I did not like it. I hated the new baseball. I just couldn't believe that. We actually had an MLB employee come to check on us. They asked us all questions, what we thought of it, what we didn't like about it, what we liked about it. I was very verbal in my disliking. Very verbal.
Very explicit, very verbal, very detailed on how
Yes.
you felt.
Very. So.
Yeah. Yeah, but again, like this is where the evolution of the game is. So as much as we are seeing the players starting to get protected, and again, this episode wasn't to, talk smack or look down on everything with MLB. It's nothing with that. I think it's the purpose of this was to enlighten listeners, enlighten fans on what really is transpiring, and you can get a full picture of what players have been going through for years. And I think and guys who make it to the major leagues, you get lost in that type of world. So when you're up there and again, there's only X amount of people that can be major league players and accomplish what they do and have that success. But sometimes it can not saying it's forgotten, but the most cases, guys you spend a lot of time with, former teammates, the grind is still really real for not just that generation of player, but then for future generations. And that's been what's been going on for decades.
Absolutely. And players from now on are going to have much better situations in the minor leagues. They're going to be taken care of. There will be standards. There will be raises in pay. But I think having a standard and a baseline of what teams must provide will make a more universal impact on players for the better. I think when you're with different teams prior to now, different teams operate in different ways. You might have had a great experience with one club and a not as a lesser experience with a different organization because it was just the wild, wild west. With standards now, I think it's a much better, much more controlled minor leagues. And it's monumental that players have a voice and are backed and as seen as real players versus, part-time seasonal employees.
Yeah, I'm with you. I was just thinking about with everything with it. I'm a big eater, big guy. Big guy likes to eat.
I'd say two entree guy at dinners.
A two entree guy at dinner, two breakfast guy. I'm an expensive date when it comes to eating. And I just remember at times, especially I felt I would get more fed in spring training than I would for the duration of the season. And I remember at times, I remember in Frederick specifically, and again, this is not, it's just where things were at the time. And you have X amount of guys on the roster. And there's another thing about portions. Like, I'm saying I like to eat a lot, but if there's a group of people, I'm not going to be that guy and take 3 heapings of food so no one else gets to eat.
But then you got to go.
I always made sure.
But then you got to, you take one helping or one portion, and then you've got to go out to dinner again after.
Yeah, and that's what happened. I had times where I'd be out, either I would see family or talk to fans outside, and I'd come in, I'd be one of the last guys in, and there wouldn't be any food. And it's in that case, it was just we had guys, but yeah, sure, could guys take more? But the main problem was we just were running out of food more consistently. And you've heard more worse stories of guys just not getting enough quality. I for me personally, I always dropped a good amount of weight during the season, and that's probably attributed to not working out as much, the process. But nutrition is a big thing. I didn't feel that I could nutritionally be able to play at the high level. I think the majority of the money I've spent in my playing career was eating.
I would believe it based on watching you eat in the past.
It's my fuel. But anyway, so you're hoping to see more. That this is where the evolution of the game. I guess now, like as we're getting closer, we're getting closer to wrapping up here. But where do you see the next step? What is one thing you would like to see?
I would like
move forward.
I'd like to see the minor leagues stay where they're at with affiliates. I think this is a generation now where in the past you needed every single level because you had to develop, you had to find yourself as a pitcher, which took a lot of time. Now you see a lot of kids coming out of college or in college that are in the mid upper 90s. This was not the case a decade ago. And so the evolution of pitching has just really increased at an exponentially rapid pace. But there's a development tool that is being missed by cutting down on affiliates. And just because you have stuff at a young age doesn't mean you know how to pitch. That takes time. And I think where we're at with 4 affiliates is it's a solid number where players can not be rushed through the minor leagues, but also I don't want to see it slow down because it does take time.
It's a journey. And that's the thing is there's a reason why the majority of players, I don't have the exact number, but I'd love to believe it's in the high 90s of guys not going from the MLB or going from the draft straight to the majors. Everyone at some point, if you're in the major league draft, is going through the minors because they're going to take time. High school kids, imagine you can have good stuff if you're a pitcher, you're a more complete player, but you still got to go through the levels because there's just evolutions of the game that you need to go through and understand.
I know Chris Leak is potentially there's got to be less than a handful. I remember Chris Leak was one player who went straight from college to the big leagues. And much past that, I would put that it's under 5 for MLB drafted players.
Yeah, it's not a high number. If we went through all the numbers of players, the thousands and thousands of players that have been drafted, it'd be a great test average. If you're taking a test at high 90s, you're feeling good about that average. That's what it is, because it's a development. You're trying to find. That's the other thing too, is you're trying to find yourself. It's not like when you get into your 30s and your 40s and you've come more into your own of who you are as a person, and you can understand your emotions and how to work and your consistencies. You're still trying to figure things out, and that's another part of it, just like everything in life. But I think sometimes gets underutilized, because I've seen, how many times have we talking about guys maturing, like players maturing, trying to figure things out. But it's no knock to them. That's part of the process.
Typically happens in the minor leagues as you develop and go through growing pains, so you are ready for the major leagues. More often than not, now you're seeing it happen at the major league level, where these young players are getting up there and being forced to go through the growing pains on a national scale, on an international scale, at the highest level of the major leagues.
Yeah, and that's not just what it is. And it's fascinating. Also, because I'm going to do some quick hitters with you here, Steve, and we can wrap up and get out of here. I just want to point out and give thanks to all the host families over the years. I don't think that's the other part of this agreement, was now that housing is paid for, that's kind of eliminated that component. But the other part of it for guys coming up was people opening their homes for players to stay. And that's, and in most cases, a lot of these people wouldn't charge you anything and would let you be able to live there. So for people with that, thank you. I had a lot of great ones. I was fortunate to have a lot of great ones. But without that type of help, a lot of players, wouldn't be able to financially be in a good place. So, but anyway, quick hitters, Steve, because then we'll get out of here. We'll move on. So since we're on the food subject, pregame meal, what was one of your things you had to have?
Fruit. I was a big fruit guy. A lot of fruit.
Are we talking
melon? I like watermelon. Watermelon is my favorite fruit. That's my favorite pregame snack.
That's
watermelon is my favorite. You asked for my favorite quick hitter, watermelon.
Okay, quick hitter. Fine. That's great. I think I used to be a lot of PB&Js before, and then honestly, where the hits were, I think I had salads.
You love salads. Hits. Big salad guy over there.
I did. Big salad guy. Big salad guy. Places you enjoyed playing.
Oh, I was just in Wichita, Kansas last year. Let me tell you, first class city, first class people, first class stadium. Very well done out there.
Beautiful. Worst bus trip you've had?
Well, that would probably do it. Wichita, I had to go to Corpus Christi. It was about 15 hours. I also had Rome, Georgia, which I think was a
Woof.
16 or 17 hour day. That was a tough one.
I had that one too. And also, just a quick story for mine. I had one coming back from Hagerstown or Asheville to Hagerstown, Maryland, and our bus overheated. And we had to get all the water on the bus, drinking water, to then throw onto the engine for the last hour and a half until we got home. Actually, our GM of Hagerstown met us to help. He had a big bring back the 5 gallon. He had a 5 gallon thing to help cool off the engine to help us get home. So those stories are real. That could be for a different time. And then lastly, here with a quick hitter, what is something, if there's a piece of advice to ask everyone that resonates with you on a day-to-day basis?
Enjoy the ride. I think the minor leagues are what you make it. You can have fun with it. You can get caught up in it. You can have a lot of emotions in the minor leagues, but it's what you make it, and that's what you'll remember. So enjoy the ride, take it for what it is, and just enjoy it in stride.
Life's a journey, right? You don't know what's going to happen, and we always thinking about what the next thing is or how bad something is, but you look up and it's over, and the only thing you're going to have left back is the memories. And for us, that's the thing I always tell people: the memories and the people that you're with make the experience. Not necessarily if you gave up 5 home runs, even though you might remember that as well, or you strike out 4 times in a game. That feels good as well. But Steve, that's it. That's all I got. I will put you on the off-script budget for next time. You can come on up.
Perfect.
And I'm sure we'll talk more soon. But thanks for coming on today.
Thanks for having me. Excited to stay at the Four Seasons on your budget next time.
Oh, perfect. Great. All right. And on that note, that is it for this episode. That does it for this episode of Off Script with Rip. And as always, if you liked this episode and like this podcast, please do me a favor and like and subscribe or leave a review. All of those things are very helpful to help me grow this podcast. And ultimately, I want to make this a better experience for all of you. So see you next time for another episode of Off Script with Rip.